Hey everybody, this is Angela. We're back again. This is week 2 of the Eloquent JavaScript book club. A bunch of my friends and I got together and we are reading a chapter a week, and we're meeting up on Google Hangout to talk about what? Eloquent JavaScript. So last week was chapter 1, and it was all of the basics. We did, operators and just basic JavaScript information. This week, we're going into chapter 2. And chapter 2 deals a lot with program structures. So what we normally do here is people will post like 3 questions, comments, concerns, whatever, into the chat. And we'll make sure that everyone gets an opportunity to speak about it, to comment on it, to ask questions about it. And there we go. So let's see. We're going to start. Ebony is handling the reins this week. So she's going to wrangle us in during our book club meeting. So Ebony, take it away.
All right. Well, I'll try to wrangle everyone in, but so I created a really short slide of highlights from chapter 2 that I found the most interesting, and then I'm gonna ask everyone else to share their highlights, what they found interesting, what they want to share in general. So yeah, let me share my screen. And there we go. Okay, let me know when you see my slides.
I see your slides.
All right. So basically chapter 2 was finally being able to write programs. Chapter 1 was all about data types and how to define what values are acceptable in JavaScript, but in chapter 2 you finally get a chance to play around in the browser and see what you can come up with. So we learned a bunch of new vocab, and I thought this was kind of important because as a full-time developer, you don't really, and I don't full-time develop in JavaScript, but I feel like it's rare that you hear the official terms mentioned or talked about. And so we learned about expressions, statements, and how basically you can have expressions within expressions, and then statements are made up of expressions, and statements have side effects which affect how the program, if you let it affect the program, it'll affect the program, have a side effect. You learn that variables also called binding, and in this book in particular, I think they're going to utilize binding much more. And so just know that that's another name for a variable, and it makes sense because binding, you're tagging a name to value, so you're essentially binding it. It's not, and it's something you can actually, depending on what kind of keyword you use for the binding, like let are constant. If you use the let keyword to bind a value to a name, that means you can easily, you can vary the value of that binding name. But if you use the const keyword for a binding, it just means constant binding. That means once you bind it to the constant, the name of the constant, then you can't change that. And it's not, and for use cases, it's not really meant to be changed if you want something to be constant and make sure it's not changed. So yeah, we learned about binding and variables. Also learned about keywords and reserved words, and how, example of keywords, let, const, and reserved words like catch, I believe, try, catch, all that fun stuff. So basically the main gist there is that you can't use keywords or reserved words when you're creating a variable or a binding name, and that's one of the criteria when you're creating names. You also learn about environments, which I thought was interesting. I like how they defined environment as a definition as kind of like the runtime when functions and actual variables are live and accessible. It made me think about the fact that the browser is actually an environment, and even if you aren't running a particular program that you built, if you open up a console and some of the standard JavaScript functions that are available, that's proof right there that the environment is up and running because you have those core standard JavaScript functions and variables available to you. So I thought that was interesting to make that connection there. And of course, you learned about functions and arguments and how functions is basically a group of statements in a block, and how arguments are things that you provide to the function, and it can be 0 to many arguments you provide to a function. I touched on let and const keywords already, and I actually had to give myself a reality check myself, because I haven't been using this myself. These constant keywords, I've been always using var, and I should not be using that anymore. I should embrace the ES6, aka 2015 JavaScript, and just use let and const, no more var. I talked about the binding naming convention. Not only can you not use keywords and reserved words, you should not be starting it with a digit, and it shouldn't contain any punctuation or special characters except for the $ and the underscore. This chapter also touched on the joys of console log. We all love console log. It's like required for debugging. And I thought it was interesting how it pointed out that it's not actually a function in the straightforward sense. What you're doing is accessing a log property that's in the console object that is a part of the standard JavaScript. And of course, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what the chapter was getting at. So I thought that was cool. You don't really encounter many functions like that with a dot in them, we'll say. More highlights that I like to point out. We learned a lot about conditionals and loops. If statements, while loops, do while loops, for loops. I personally don't use a lot of do while loops, and I would love for anyone to come up with a use case for it. But I thought the example in the book was kind of cool, how it'll spit out a prompt for you to enter a certain amount to enter information, and it won't let you enter an empty input. So it's going to keep running the loop until you actually enter information that it needs. So I thought that was cool. I'm not sure if that's actually a valid use case for something like that. I'm not sure if anyone else uses it, but is someone trying to talk? Nope. All right. So a few more things. Switch statements. I kind of forgot about switch statements myself, and I probably should be using them more. I really like them, and I'm going to try to use them more. But one of the course about switch statements that I didn't realize that might be beneficial in the future when I'm trying to think of use cases for using switch statements is that it's kind of like a waterfall effect when you're using a switch statement. If you have a case where say you're like, I don't know, you're going to the grocery store and you have I equals an apple, and then you go through all the cases where, a case of orange, case of pineapple, case of apple, case of this, and you're spitting out different statements based off what that is. You can actually have collapsible conditional executions if you leave out a break. So conventionally, what you do when you're specifying a case, you say, okay, case of apple. If I equals apple, you can spit out, oh, this is an apple, and then you usually have a break after that to break out of the switch statement, so nothing else is executed. I didn't really think about the fact that you can maybe utilize the fact that you don't have to include a break sometimes if you would like statements to execute back to back, and you don't really care, and you don't, not that you don't care, but and you can utilize the fact that, oh, a statement is after this statement in a switch statement, and it's actually beneficial for the statements to execute one after another, even if the case is not exactly what the I is. But it's something better I can explain by showing to you, but I'll show something later. Other things that I wanted to point out was the break versus continue in a loop. Break is when you want to actually break out of the execution of the loop, when a certain set a certain condition is satisfied. And I actually haven't thought about continue myself as of late, but continue can be useful too, because once you encounter continue in the loop, it does stop the loop, but it goes back to the beginning of the loop. So if you have a case where you need to execute all these statements, and then depending on a condition, you need to go back to the beginning of the loop and start again, that'd be very beneficial to use continue over break. And lastly, I want to point out was the cool binder update shortcuts. We all know those fun stuff. How you can easily use the shortcut to add, subtract, multiply a certain amount into the pre-existing value. And of course, it comes into play too when you're doing conditionals, comparing like greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. And of course, in the for loops, we use the plus plus or minus minus, which is super shorthand for add one or subtract one. And that's pretty much all the highlights that I have. But I just want to take a quick look at what the exercise at the end that I did. I did not do the chessboard, so I look forward to seeing one of you explain we have such solutions to that, because I couldn't figure it out. But these were I think these were pretty straightforward in my opinion. The fizz buzz, that's, we talk about that. I feel like that's a very popular tech interview problem to solve. So I thought it was cool to see that in the book. For the first one, looping through the triangle, I actually really want to use a do-while loop because I never use them. So this is what I did. I basically defined a variable called triangle and set it equal to the first line, which is the pound. And then going in the do-while loop, I print it first because that's going to be the top of the triangle. And then I go ahead and add another pound to it. And I'm always checking to make sure that the length of the triangle is less than or equal to 7. So yeah, and that's all I got for starting us off. If anyone wants to bring up any questions or maybe show their solutions for the exercise problems themselves, that'd be very awesome to see how everyone solved the problems if they had a chance to go through it.
I know FizzBuzz, I've done that one. What I found out, like, I cheated. I couldn't figure out how to do the triangle, and I was like, this seems so simple. This seems so simple. So what I didn't think about was, in my for loop, I'm like, how can I get my variable, which is a number? No, the variable wasn't a number. It was a hashtag. And then when I saw the solution, I was like, I didn't know that you could do that. Like, you could literally say, all right, I want this to be one hashtag. And then I'm going to go through my for loop. And now I'm going to add a hashtag. And now I want it to be 2 for. Okay, my mind was blown. That's all I'm going to say. I was too busy like, well, it's a for loop. I didn't know that it didn't register that, yes, you can have a hashtag as a variable for I. And the minute I cheated, I was like, for some reason, I can't figure this out. And so I was stumped by that one. And I didn't try the chessboard. So anybody else?
Because I find so I'm in this like a disaster situation, and then I'm always trying to help people like debug their code, and then I find a lot of times people forget to comment, and then like after a couple of days looking at the code and you take a break and you come back to it, sometimes you're like, what did I do here? And so just I feel like comments are godsend, like they should be be utilized. Like, it doesn't matter if you have a comment like on every line of your code, just use them. So that was yeah, that was just like a good reminder. And then for me, like, I did all the exercises, but what I'm always finding, I don't know if you guys do HackerRank, which is like a challenge website too. What I'm finding is that I write really long code. A lot of times I do it and I get through it no problem, but then when I look at other people's code, I'm like, I could have done this with 2 lines, and why do I have 6? So the same thing happened with the triangle one. Mine was a little bit longer. Mine was longer because I did like an if else statement. I've never seen the way you did it. I've never seen it done that way. That was kind of and I didn't know about this that way.
Thank you.
And yeah, so that was really like that's something that I'm working on, just getting to be able to write more efficient code and closer code. Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm gonna turn my camera around to my laptop screen. Don't know how well you can see it. Can you see that? Okay. Okay, I can see what you can see. Alright. So I did the third one, but I don't know if the way that I did it was like cheating or not. But I basically assigned an entire row as a variable, and I sort of gave a size to how many rows how many, different ones I wanted. Like, I guess you can think of it as the max number of rows that I want, but I'm starting off with always at least one. So I say that if my row is less than or equal to the max size that I want, or while the row is less than or equal to the size that I want, if the row is evenly,
Can you move your camera down a little bit? I'm only seeing the front there.
Okay. Yeah. So if the row that we're on is evenly divisible by 2, you just print the column. That's not even a column. I misnamed that, but you get what I mean. You print one of these just the way it is, and if it isn't even, you put a space in front of it. So I don't know if that's like the right way you're supposed to do it. I think there are some ways that you can do it with an array, but we haven't touched on that yet, so I figured we weren't supposed to do that. But as you can see, it's sort of like, alternating on every row. So that's one way of doing it. Yeah, I could go into the ways that I did the first 2 exercises as well. But yeah, I just wanted to show that there's like a little bit, I guess, of a shortcut to do the third one. I didn't look at the solution, so I'm not sure if there was a better way. But
That was really, really cool. That's a smart way to do it.
Yeah.
What do they say? Work smarter, not harder.
there we go.
Yeah.
Heat it up.
Sure.
No, cool. Take your packets. Keep your Polynesian packet.
I'm definitely not looking forward to the future exercises because it's just going to get harder.
I think that's the part I'm looking forward to. I mean, no, let me take that back. I like the fact that we're going over a lot of basics. The couple of things that I kind of pulled out of the chapter was binding versus variables. Same thing that you mentioned, because they're the same thing. I don't I'm like, okay, why are they giving it a fancy new name in ES6? Why are they doing that? But I guess because they're separating how different var and let are, and I still haven't figured out exactly how they're different. I remember when I was doing the the case statement in the console, console, and I had assigned, you know, a variable using let, and then I went, because I up arrowed and I hit enter and I did it again, and it gave me like this I don't remember the message, but it was almost as if, wait, you can't do that because it's not like const. It errored on let, and I'm gonna have to rerun that so I can actually capture that error message. So what I did was I refreshed my browser, and of course that gets rid of it, and I was able to up arrow and then reassign my let and my var and my const, just to, you know, play around with the different binding types, variable types. And so switch statements are the new if else, not the new if else, but no one ever thinks about, I don't want to say no one, because in my boot camp we haven't gotten to switch statements. So we're doing all these if else, and I'm like, boy, I just want to do a switch statement. One good switch statement real fast, but we haven't gotten there. So, you know, I don't want to be that chick. I'm just trying to lay low. So I'm glad to see that you guys, you tried to solve the triangle, and of course FizzBuzz. If you don't know what FizzBuzz is, you must learn how to solve for FizzBuzz. And what we'll do is we'll grab Bree's code, we'll grab Ebony's code, thanks, and whoever else, well, I'll put mine up there as well. We'll start a repo. And we'll post that on that's why not? So we can keep up with chapter by chapter what we're doing. I think as it goes on, there'll be more and more coding exercises. So in the beginning, there won't be much to it. But I hope at some point, you know, there'll be, you know, a bunch of stuff out there. If someone reads the book, they'll have some really great examples to work on. And also, don't forget, you can always go to the Eloquent, hi puppy, you can always go to eloquentjavascript.net, and they have a space where you can try the code, you can get the solutions for the code after you've banged your head on your keyboard a couple times, of course. So definitely keep your eye out for that. If you're reading along with us, we will be back next week. But we didn't hear, my pups are here. So does anyone else want to say anything? Because this was I think it was 20 pages or so. And even if you're a code newbie, you probably understood a lot of what was there. There was probably less new information. But I don't want to speak for you guys and gals. So I'll give you the floor.
What was the question?
Were there any comments or anything that you gleaned out of the chapter that you want to mention?
Oh, Nayana, we can't hear you.
No wonder I kept talking. Anything. I was like, oh, I just got, sorry. All right. With the let statement, I put in a link from developer.mozilla.org. because I too was wondering why I never saw the let statement. I'm very familiar with constants and variables in Java. And what I saw was that let is a local variable, which meant that it could only be, it could only be accessed in that block of code, whereas a variable could be global, so it's going to be at the top where you would name your constant. So it could be outside that line of that function or that line of code, or it's going to be accessed at the top where it could be available to any part of the project or any part of that function, any of the functions outside of each line of function, which would make it global. And then the other thing I wanted to put out there for resources, because time and time again we see the for and the do while loop. My concern is always when there's two bindings, as the workshop wrote or the book wrote, where you had two variables, then it told you that, while or do, X, an event would happen. And, while that event is happening, you needed an event to happen to make sure you needed a catch statement. So when you're talking about catch statements, in order to make that do while loop stop, you needed an event to occur, because if you don't, the loop will keep going and keep going, which can become an issue when you're talking about actually deploying sites, because sometimes people say, oh, my site crashed because it didn't know when to stop. The loop kept going and going and going and trying. With that being said, I think I like Eloquent JavaScript because it broke it down. But in my personal opinion, I felt like this is something that you almost need to keep practicing it, like a math problem. So I went online and I saw earlier today, glitch.io had some JavaScript practice problems that you could actually practice into the site. Because where it gets a little funky for me is because it wants you to, let's say they gave you the variable counter. They give it to you at 0. Well, if you're saying it's less than, when counter is less than 10, okay, well, it does get that way. Like some of the do while loops want you to automatically go through the entire function first, and some of them want you to negate it before it happens. So I think my issue is knowing when to differentiate the two. That's the one thing. And then being able to understand that counter happens, you may see it more than once, and it resembles different things. So the first time the counter is in the parentheses, you're trying to determine if it's going to, equal, got you. If it's going to equal, where it says while counter is less than 10, well, that's the first time you have to, make sure that it that statement is valid. But then when you go into the brackets, you have to do it again, and it becomes confusing. With that being said, I felt like Eloquent JavaScript is a great basis to understand how everything is working, but I believe that we should almost do some more problems, because when I saw chapter 3, I think it's a little more difficult for me. But that was it. I gave you a whole lot. Codewars.com, and let me put glitch. I'll put glitch in the site. Other than that, I'm done.
Thank you very much, Nayana. Let's see. I have another. Oh, Eileen posted Code Wars. We're also going to post HackerRank, and of course, HackerRank is a popular site where you can practice coding problems. We'll be sure to put all of the links that we mentioned and the resources down below, so you can check them out for yourself. And if you have any questions, definitely comment below, and we'll be monitoring and we'll be able to get back to you. So let's see, we have Brianna, we have Ebony, we have Eileen, we have who else? Charmel is here, we have Mia. Did I leave anybody out? No? All right, we're all present and accounted for. Does anyone else have anything to say?
Shanice is here too.
Shanice! I don't see your name. I'm reading down the I'm sorry. I was looking at the chat window. And last but not least, the wonderful Shanice. I'm sorry. Shanice, it's your turn. You're up.
I think as a code newbie, I might be like the most beginner of the group. It was definitely, I really, really like the way the book is written. It's been great. I feel like I'm understanding. I really like how it's breaking things down. It's not as like, I don't want to say technical, but technical as I thought. I thought, I'm going to read this and have a hard time understanding. I think my familiarity with Ruby is helping me, I understand the fundamentals. So I do like how we're kind of going over what is specific to JavaScript, like let, which is not something that I was familiar with. I was familiar with variable and constant, which is used in other languages. So I thought that was interesting, and just learning like little details that apply to more than one language. Like a lot of what we learned in chapter 1, I felt like spanned a couple languages. I didn't do the exercises, but I plan to do them and post my results. I'm sure they won't be accurate. Does the book have solutions at the end?
Maybe, but they're definitely on the website.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, if they're not in the book, I'm not 100% sure, but they are. I found mine on the website. So yes, if you get stuck, you can always go there. And they also have a little, I want to call it a browser console where you can enter in your commands and run them and see if they work, and which is awesome. But of course, I did mine in Chrome Developer Tools in that console. You can write them in a JS file attached to an HTML doc and run it that way. So there's many ways to test this out, but definitely it's kind of cool that the book made it available that you can test out the code on their website, which is actually really helpful.
And I made an organization in GitHub.
Oh, cool.
SistaCode, so we'll be able to put our code there. So I'll send everyone an invite.
Awesome. Awesome. Let's see. We haven't heard from Charmel and Mia.
Charmel dropped off, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Well, Charmel, is Mia still here? Anything you want to add, Mia? No. Okay. She's the silent one of the group. If you know Mia, you know this is totally her MO. Mia!
Okay, so I had my microphone turned off.
Oh, okay. This is Mia.
Hi.
Hey.
So let's see. I didn't really get a chance to do the exercises either because I meant to, but then I was at work and then I was on the train. So, but but one thing I was thinking about is the infinite loop a little bit, because the other day I accidentally at work wrote an infinite loop that crashed the browser. And that was an interesting experience, trying to figure out where in my code it was looping infinitely and breaking things. So that's what it made me think of. But it was really cool to read through the chapter and kind of think about JavaScript and why it's that way. Like, at work, I tend to just, like, poke my way through the JavaScript without necessarily thinking about, like, finding and, like, the words that tell us what these things are. And so it's pretty cool to sort of, like, read about that and learn, like, remember why things are the way they are. I don't know if I'm actually making sense.
Cool. I think what we're going to get out of this, at the very least, we're going to understand the why. A lot of us do things in code. We copy and paste from, Stack Overflow or somewhere else, and we try it, we run it. If it works, sometimes you're just satisfied with getting something to work, especially if you're working on a project and you have a deadline, or if you're, troubleshooting, or if you're writing from someone else's code. I think what this book is going to help us do is understand more why. There'll be less of, I think, as it goes on, because we're going to gain this understanding just by reading and hearing what other people think about the topics. At the end of it, I think we're going to have a greater understanding of the why in JavaScript. And I think that'll be invaluable, because there are very few, there's Ruby and all of these, and Rails and all these other programming languages. Well, JavaScript is a scripting language, but anyway, I digress. JavaScript is really popular, and it's really big, and it's changing. I mean, we got the 2015 ES, we have ES6, ES7's coming out, so there's all these changes. I think this is going to bode really well for us, personally and professionally, being able to glean a lot of good information out of this book. So this was a great idea, and I don't even know what the next book is going to be, but I'm looking forward to it already. Like, I want to know all the things, and I think this book club is going to make sure we know all the things. So does anyone else have any parting comments? We can go down the line and say our parting comment or goodbye or whatever you want to do.
Well, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to all the exercises. I love doing exercises. I'm masochist that way, but I'm really looking forward to the next chapter, and I'm really glad to have you guys to share this learning, all the things.
Thanks, Eileen. Who's up?
I just wanted to, hopefully we could create maybe even a list of suggested books. I just wanted to bring up, I had a mentoring session last week, and the book that came up at Codeland, which was the browser networking, also came up in my mentoring session. And then one of the things that I just wanted us to keep in the forefront of our minds is that not only do we learn the how to do the programming, but understand what's going on with programming. And I'll just leave us with a question. Think about it. I don't have the answer quite yet. I was asked, what happens when someone goes to Google or any other website? Just being able to understand the process so that as we're developing, we understand what's going on. And some of you may already know that. I don't. But just making sure that as we program, develop, and build, we understand what's really going on throughout the whole process, because I think it'll help us with development overall.
I just posted a link to a Code Newbie podcast. It was aired on November 6th. It was How Do Browsers Work with Lynn Clark. So if you're not familiar, Code Newbie is a online community. It is a podcast. And funny thing that you mentioned it, I just listened to this podcast this morning. It is a great primer on how browsers work, piggybacking off of what Nayana said, and we'll also post the title of the what was it called? Something networking. We'll make sure we post that.
It is called browser networking, and I will post the link in this chat because it's free online.
Great, cool.
Can I just say also, while we're talking about that episode of the podcast, that one is one of my favorite things because it just explains so much. And I'm like, oh, so that's how it works, and then you realize how much goes into the internet, and people are so entitled that you have to wait 3 seconds longer for your website to load, and you complain about it without but when you realize how much work goes into it, I have gained so much respect for computers and the internet. I'm like, oh, okay, well, maybe I won't complain anymore.
I had the same feeling after listening to that podcast.
I also just posted a video that I think was in the Colt Steele actually boot camp. He had a video with, hey, watch this video on how their networks. It's like 4 minutes, less than 4 minutes, for a quick little reminder, like a really high level overview of how their networks. And of course, I haven't listened to the podcast either, so I'm gonna listen to that. But I actually really like this visual and how it's kind of short and sweet, and it kind of reminds me, okay, this is how it works. Yeah, so check that out too.
Cool. Anybody else? Great. Well, thank you again for joining us. Again, we are reading Eloquent JavaScript. We're on chapter 2. Join us next week where we will be reading chapter 3. Feel free to read along, and we'll see you then. Bye. Say bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.